Okay. So Russell's paradox is the one part, I think, of today's talk where it will be disadvantageous to be from Boston. So what letter do you think we will use to denote the Russell set? Yeah, I can't say that loud. So we will let R be the following collection. It is the set of all x such that x is not an element of x. Okay? Most things are not elements of themselves. If you look at the set of all integers, is the set of all integers itself an integer? No. So the set of all integers would be an element of R. Okay? Most things that don't belong to themselves. Okay, so one of the big questions in set theory is, what is a set? Well, students are basically taught if you have a collection of objects, you can take a subset of objects that all have a common property, and that will form a new set. So I will take some property P on teams that were destroyed in Super Bowl in recent time, and you will put the Denver Broncos in that set. And depending on how far back you go for recent times, sadly the New England Patriots against the Chicago Bears would go into that set as well. And so if I give you a property, I can build a set. So the question is this a set? My property is you don't belong to yourself. So who thinks this is a set? Who thinks it's not a set? Who thinks it might be a set? Alright, let's check some elements. Can anybody give me an element that we can try to explore to see if it's an R?
You'd like the integers example that you picked?
So the integers was an example. There's one really natural thing to look at to see if it's an R. It's the only thing on the board. There's only one thing on the board right now. R. So there are two cases. Right? Case 1, R is an R. Case 2, R is not in R. Right? Well, what would it mean if R is an R? R is the collection of all things that are not elements of themselves. So if R is an R, what can you deduce? So if R is the set of all things that are not elements of themselves, if R happened to be an R, R is not an element of R. Contradiction. Right? Because R is the collection of all things that aren't elements of themselves, so if R happened to be an R, that's a contradiction. So really I shouldn't have to worry about case 2, but let's just do it because we've got a lot of time to fill today. So case 2 is R is not an element of R. Oh, goody! R is the collection of all things that are not elements of themselves. I've just told you R is not an element of itself, therefore R must belong to R. Again, a contradiction. So you get R is an element of R if and only if it is not an element of R. R is not a set. You can't just take a collection of objects that have a property and put them together and create a set. So this led to a huge revolution in set theory. And so Frege was about to come up with a monumental treatise on set theory when Russell, I think he might have been a grad student at the time, pointed this out to him. Because this is being recorded, I will not say the words Frege probably uttered when he saw this example, as he sees the whole edifice of set theory come crashing down. But they were very good. They realized that fundamentally they had to revisit their whole notion of how we build up sets. Now again, most people don't really care, most people don't really need this, but it's very easy when you don't prove things to start building things on false assumptions and eventually get to a point where you reach a contradiction. So this is one of the easiest examples I know of to explain something that seems reasonable. I have a property, and I want to group all the things together that share that property. Now, my brother is an engineer at MathWorks, and for the most part, he doesn't care about stuff like this because it doesn't really arise in the things he's doing. But things like this can be useful to teach students. You have to be very careful to explain what are you studying. If I restrict this to all X that live in a certain set, such that this property holds, then things are more reasonable. And so then we had to rethink our notion of inclusion. We needed to think our notion of discourse. What objects are we studying? Okay. So what I want to do now